My name is Rachel Wilson, 32, and I never imagined my sister's wedding would become national news for all the wrong reasons. I was staring at my phone in disbelief as the video played again, my sister's new husband, Mark, slapping her across the face at their reception after she playfully smashed cake on his lips. The same sister who hadn't invited me to her wedding because I was too negative about her relationship. Now my phone was blowing up with family members asking if I'd seen it. Karma works in mysterious ways. But this wasn't the vindication I wanted. If you've ever had that gut feeling about someone your family member was dating, you know exactly how I felt watching that video. Before I dive into the whole painful story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. This family drama took me through the lowest valleys and eventually to healing. So please hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with toxic relationships or family conflict. Trust me, what happened next will show you why sometimes being excluded is just the beginning of a much bigger story. Emma and I grew up as close as sisters could be, despite our 4-year age gap. I remember carrying her around when she was a toddler, her little arms wrapped tightly around my neck, calling me Rachie because she couldn't pronounce Rachel yet. We shared a bedroom in our modest suburban home in Pennsylvania until I was 14, and even after I moved to the converted attic space, Emma would sneak up most nights just to talk. We had our own language of inside jokes, secret signals during family dinners, and dreams we'd whisper about after our parents thought we were asleep. Everything changed when our parents divorced. I was 18, ready to head to college, and Emma was only 14, that vulnerable age when you're not a child anymore, but definitely not ready to deal with adult problems. Dad moved out after we discovered he'd been having an affair with his dental hygienist for nearly 2 years. Mom fell apart, spending most days in bed, leaving Emma without the guidance she desperately needed. I couldn't leave for college knowing my sister would be alone in that emotional wasteland. Instead of moving into my dorm at Penn State, I enrolled in community college and picked up a job at the local coffee shop to help with bills. Every morning, I'd wake Emma up for school, make her breakfast, and check her homework. Every night, I'd listen to her cry about why Dad left and why Mom wouldn't get out of bed. I became more of a parent than a sister. "You shouldn't have to do this," Emma said one night when I was helping her with a science project after my 8-hour shift. "Do what?" I asked, gluing another cotton ball to her solar system model. "Take care of me. You should be at college with your friends." I remember hugging her tightly, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "You're more important." That moment defined our relationship for years. I was the practical, protective one who put others first. Emma was impulsive and craved attention, but had a heart of gold. As she moved through high school, Mom gradually recovered, and I eventually transferred to finish my business degree, but I remained Emma's primary emotional support. By the time Emma was in her early 20s and I was working at a marketing firm in Philadelphia, our dynamic had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We'd meet for Sunday brunches, call each other multiple times a week, and remained each other's emergency contact. Emma had a series of boyfriends, nothing serious, and I tried not to be overprotective when she made questionable dating choices. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed again. Emma called me, breathless with excitement. "I met someone, Ratchie. He's different from anyone I've ever dated." That someone was Mark Bradford, a regional manager at the insurance company where Emma worked as an administrative assistant. He was 35 to Emma's 25, divorced, and according to Emma, sophisticated and mature compared to guys her age. I liked Mark when I first met him at a family dinner the following month. He was polished and attentive, pulling out Emma's chair and keeping her wine glass filled. He asked thoughtful questions about my career and made Mom laugh with stories from his time studying abroad in Italy. Dad and his new wife weren't there. They rarely joined family gatherings, but even my brother Tyler seemed impressed. The first red flags appeared so gradually, I almost missed them. Mark called Emma multiple times during our sister shopping trips, asking when she'd be home. She started canceling our brunches because Mark had made other plans. When she did see me, she'd check her phone constantly, explaining that Mark worried when she didn't respond quickly. "He just cares about me," she'd say with a nervous laugh. At 6 months into their relationship, Emma had stopped seeing most of her friends. Her vibrant wardrobe of colorful dresses had been replaced with muted tones that Mark found more elegant. She'd stopped posting her funny Instagram stories because Mark thought they were unprofessional. The incident that crystallized my concerns happened at a family dinner celebrating Mom's birthday. Emma had been talking to Tyler's wife about a TV show they both loved, laughing at inside jokes from recent episodes. Mark, who'd been speaking with Mom across the table, suddenly reached over and squeezed Emma's arm. "Sweetheart, we were discussing Diana's garden renovation. Don't you want to join that conversation instead?" It wasn't what he said, but how he said it, the steel beneath the velvet tone, the slight tightening around his eyes. Emma immediately stopped mid-sentence and turned her attention to Mom's garden plans. I caught Tyler's wife's confused expression, matching my own concern. After dinner, I found Emma alone in the kitchen and gently broached the subject. "Everything okay with you and Mark?" He seemed a little controlling at dinner. Emma's defenses shot up instantly. "He wasn't being controlling. He just knows I'm interested in gardening." "Since when?" "You've killed every houseplant you've ever owned," I tried to joke. "People change, Rachel. You still see me as your little sister who needs protection. But I'm a grown woman. I know you are. I just what? Think I can't make my own decisions about my relationship?" Her voice had risen. "Mark respects me. He wants me to be my best self. And who decides what your best self is? You or Mark?" That was the beginning of the rift between us. Every attempt I made to point out concerning behavior was met with increasing defensiveness. When I mentioned that Emma had stopped playing volleyball, a sport she'd loved for years, because Mark thought it took too much time away from them as a couple, she accused me of trying to sabotage her happiness. When I expressed concern that she'd turned down a promotion that would require some travel because Mark didn't want her away from home, she said I was jealous because I was single. Our mother, Diana, refused to see the problem. "He's just old-fashioned, Rachel. He takes care of her. And he has such a good job." Mom had struggled financially after the divorce and saw financial stability as the ultimate security. By the time Mark had been in Emma's life for 8 months, we were barely speaking. I stopped bringing up my concerns directly, but couldn't pretend I approved either. Emma interpreted my silence as judgment, which I suppose it was. I was watching my vivacious, independent sister disappear into a relationship that seemed designed to diminish her, and I felt powerless to stop it. The engagement announcement came via family group text, a photo of Emma's hand sporting a diamond ring that looked too heavy for her delicate fingers. She said, "Yes," read Mark's message, sent from Emma's phone. Notice he didn't write, "I said yes." Even in that moment, it felt like Mark was announcing his own accomplishment rather than a mutual decision. The engagement party 2 weeks later was an elaborate affair at an upscale hotel downtown, with at least 100 guests. Mark had apparently spared no expense, with champagne flowing freely and a 5-piece band. Emma floated through the room in a designer dress I knew she couldn't afford on her salary. Her smile fixed in place as Mark guided her from group to group, his hand firmly at the small of her back. "Isn't this amazing?" Mom gushed, sidling up to me at the bar where I nursed a gin and tonic. "Mark must have spent a fortune. Emma's so lucky." "Is she?" I couldn't help asking. "Have you noticed she barely speaks unless Mark prompts her?" "That's not the Emma we know." Mom's smile tightened. "She's just overwhelmed by all the attention. And she's maturing, Rachel. Maybe you should try being happy for her instead of looking for problems." I tried, for my sister's sake. I circulated through the party, making small talk with Mark's colleagues, who spoke about him with a deference that bordered on fear. I chatted with distant relatives who'd never bothered to attend Emma's college graduation, but had shown up for the open bar. I even managed civil conversation with Mark's parents, his father, a retired investment banker with the same cold eyes as his son, and his mother, a rail-thin woman who kept straightening Emma's already perfect hair and suggesting she might want to lose 5 pounds before the wedding. When I finally got a moment alone with Emma in the ladies' room, I barely recognized my sister, not just because of the understated makeup that had replaced her usually colorful palette or the sleek updo instead of her natural curls, but because of the caution in her eyes when she spoke. "Are you happy?" I asked simply, fixing her lipstick in the mirror. "Of course I am," she answered too quickly. "Mark is everything I've ever wanted." "Is he?" Because the Emma I know always wanted a partner who made her laugh, who loved her volleyball tournaments, who wouldn't mind when she sang off-key to 90 Seconds pop songs in the car. Emma's eyes darted to the bathroom door as if worried Mark might hear. People have different priorities when they grow up, Rachel. Security, stability, those things matter more than silly stuff. Being yourself isn't silly stuff, Em. Her eyes welled with tears. Why can't you just be happy for me? Everyone else is. Because everyone else doesn't know you like I do. I've seen how you check your phone constantly when he messages. How you've stopped wearing the colors you love. How you look at him before you speak to make sure it's okay. That's not love, Emma. That's... The bathroom door swung open, and Emma hurriedly wiped her eyes. Mark stood in the doorway, his expression darkening when he saw Emma's tears. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. His voice was controlled but cold. Your Aunt Carol wants to congratulate you. We're having a private conversation, I said, stepping slightly in front of Emma. Mark ignored me completely, extending his hand to Emma. Darling? Emma squeezed my arm briefly as she passed. I'm fine, really, she whispered. But the look Mark gave me over her shoulder was anything but fine. It was the look of someone who'd identified an obstacle and was planning its removal. A week later, I received the text that would mark the beginning of a 6-month silence between us. Rachel, I've been thinking about our conversation at the engagement party. Mark and I both feel your negativity isn't something we want at our wedding. I hope you understand that this is our special day and we need everyone there to support us fully. It's probably best if you don't attend. Love, Emma, I called immediately. No answer. I drove to her apartment. No one home. I sent messages that showed as read but received no response. It was as if my sister had vanished from my life overnight. She just needs space, Mom insisted when I called her in tears. The wedding planning is stressful. She'll come around. Can't you see what's happening? I pleaded. He's isolating her from anyone who questions their relationship. That's textbook controlling behavior. Mark says you've been undermining their relationship from the beginning, Mom replied stiffly. Maybe you should examine why you're so determined to see problems where there aren't any. Even Tyler, my usually level-headed brother, advised me to apologize just to keep the peace. It's her wedding, Rach. Let her have this day without drama. It's not about the wedding, I tried to explain. It's about Emma being with someone who's slowly cutting her off from everyone who loves her. But no one wanted to hear it. The family WhatsApp group buzzed with wedding updates, dress fittings I wasn't invited to, flower arrangements I didn't get to see, a bachelorette party I should have been hosting as the bride's only sister. I was written out of the family narrative as if I'd never existed. I threw myself into work, took on extra projects, started therapy to process the rejection. I told myself that being excluded from a wedding was better than watching my sister marry someone who didn't truly love her, who loved controlling her. But the pain of the rejection cut deep, especially as the wedding date approached and family members awkwardly avoided mentioning it around me. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through old photos of Emma and me, wondering how we'd gone from inseparable to strangers. My phone pinged with a message from Alana Carter, Emma's friend since high school, who was serving as a bridesmaid. Rachel, I know you and Emma aren't speaking, but I'm worried. Mark flipped out at the rehearsal dinner when the best man mentioned Emma's ex-boyfriend in his toast. He grabbed Emma's arm so hard it left marks. She laughed it off, but I saw her crying in the bathroom after. This doesn't feel right. I stared at the message for a long time, my stomach churning with dread. Should I try to stop the wedding? Would that only push Emma further away? In the end, I sent Emma one last message. I'm here if you need me. Anytime, day or night. I love you. It was marked as read, but no reply came. The morning of Emma's wedding dawned bright and clear. A perfect October day that felt like a mockery of my mood. I tried to focus on work, sorting through emails I'd been putting off, but my mind kept drifting to the church across town, where my sister would be getting ready, surrounded by bridesmaids, our mother, and Mark's relatives, everyone, except me. Despite everything, I couldn't let the day pass without some acknowledgement. I packaged up a small gift, a delicate silver bracelet engraved with our childhood nickname for each other, Sisters Under the Stars, a reference to our nights spent stargazing in the backyard, and attached a note. Some bonds can never be broken. Love always. Rachie. I had it delivered to the bridal suite at the church, not expecting a response but needing Emma to know I was still thinking of her. Around noon, the first photos appeared on social media. Emma in her white gown, looking beautiful but somehow diminished, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Mom arranging Emma's veil with tears streaming down her face. Mark and his groomsmen in classic black tuxedos, his expression one of smug satisfaction rather than joy. I turned off my notifications and met my friend Jenna for lunch, grateful for the distraction. We deliberately avoided wedding talk, discussing her recent promotion and a movie we'd both seen. For a few hours, I almost managed to forget what day it was. By evening, I'd settled in with a glass of wine and the mindless comfort of a baking competition show when my phone lit up with a text from Tyler. Something happened at the reception. Call me. Before I could dial, another message came through from Mom. Are you watching the video? Oh my God. Then one from Alana. Check social media. Now. With shaking hands, I opened Instagram to find my feed flooded with a video clip, already being shared with captions like "Groom slaps bride over cake" and "Wedding reception turns violent." The thumbnail image showed Emma's face frozen in shock, a smear of white frosting on her upper lip. I pressed play, my heart pounding. The video, clearly taken by a guest, showed Emma and Mark at their reception, standing behind an elaborate 4-tier wedding cake. The traditional cake-cutting moment had just occurred, with both of them holding the knife. Emma, laughing, took a small piece of cake and gently dabbed it on Mark's lips, a playful, common wedding tradition. What happened next made my blood run cold. Mark's face transformed instantly from smiling groom to unmasked fury. He grabbed Emma's wrist so hard she gasped, then released it to slap her across the face with enough force that she stumbled backward. The sound of the slap was audible even over the music and the sudden shocked silence of the guests. Emma's hand flew to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and embarrassment. "Don't ever disrespect me like that," Mark hissed, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. The video cut off as several figures I recognized. Tyler and our father rushed toward the couple. I watched it 3 times, my horror growing with each viewing. This was the real Mark, the one I'd glimpsed behind the polished facade, now exposed for everyone to see. And poor Emma, humiliated on what should have been the happiest day of her life. My phone rang. Tyler, calling from the hotel where the reception had been held. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately. "Am I okay? What about Emma? What happened after the video cut off?" Tyler sighed heavily. Dad went straight for Mark. Security had to intervene before he could hit him. Mom was hysterical. The guests were all standing around in shock. And Emma? What did Emma do? I pressed when he paused. That's the worst part. She apologized to Mark, said she shouldn't have surprised him with the cake thing. Then they left together. Dad tried to stop her from going with him, but she insisted everything was fine and they were still going on their honeymoon. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And everyone just let her leave with him? After what he did? What were we supposed to do, Rachel? Physically restrain her? She's an adult. She made her choice. A choice she's been manipulated into making. God, Tyler, I've been telling all of you for months that something wasn't right with him. The silence on the other end told me Tyler finally understood I'd been right all along. How did the video get out? I asked. One of the hotel staff recorded it on their phone. By the time we realized it was being shared, it had already gone viral. It's everywhere now. My other line beeped Mom calling. I have to go. Keep me posted if you hear from Emma. I switched calls to find my mother in tears. Rachel, I'm so sorry. You were right about him. I should have listened to you. An apology I'd waited months to hear, but it brought no satisfaction, not with Emma still in danger. Have you heard from her? I asked. No. She turned her phone off. They're still planning to leave for their honeymoon to Aruba tomorrow morning. I don't know what to do. Neither did I. But as the video continued spreading across the internet and my phone flooded with messages from family, friends, and even acquaintances who'd seen it, one thing became crystal clear. Emma needed me now more than ever, whether she realized it or not. The video that should have been a happy memory had exposed an ugly truth. But it had also created an opening, a chance to reach Emma before it was too late. As I struggled to process everything that had happened, I found myself thinking of all the times I'd protected my little sister growing up. I'd failed to protect her from Mark before the wedding. But maybe, just maybe, This viral moment of truth would give me another chance. The day after Emma's wedding, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. News outlets had picked up the video overnight, and by morning, it had millions of views. Local stations were running it with captions like "Wedding Night Horror" and "Bride Slapped at Reception." National gossip sites had somehow obtained Emma and Mark's full names and were digging into their backgrounds. Mom called at 7 a.m., her voice raw from crying. "I'm so sorry, Rachel. You tried to tell us. You saw what we didn't want to see. Have you heard from Emma?" I asked, skipping over the apology for now. "No. She was supposed to text when they got to the airport, but nothing. I'm scared, Rachel." The family converged at my parents' house by noon. Mom, Dad, who had driven in from Pittsburgh where he lived with his second wife, Tyler and his wife, Jessica. I hadn't seen Dad in months, but the gravity of the situation had brought him back into the fold. His face was haggard, his normally perfectly combed silver hair disheveled. "I should have decked him," Dad muttered as we sat around Mom's kitchen table. "When I saw him hit her, I should have laid him out right there." "And end up in jail while Emma still went home with him?" Tyler countered. "What good would that have done?" Dad had no answer for that. None of us knew what to do, caught in that terrible space between respecting Emma's autonomy and fearing for her safety. "Has anyone talked to any of Mark's family?" I asked. "His parents, friends, anyone who might know where they are now?" "His parents left the reception right after it happened," Mom said. "They didn't even say goodbye. I tried calling his mother this morning, but it went straight to voicemail." Jessica, Tyler's wife, who worked as a social worker, spoke up. "I think we need to be strategic here. If we all bombard Emma with calls and messages, it might push her further away. She's probably humiliated and confused right now." "So what do we do? Nothing?" Dad demanded. "No," Jessica said calmly. "We make sure she knows she has support when she's ready, but we don't pressure her or criticize her choices. That only isolates her more, which is exactly what Mark wants." I listened intently, realizing Jessica was echoing what my therapist had told me months ago when Emma first cut me off. Back then, I'd been too hurt and worried to fully process that advice. Now, with the stakes so much higher, it made perfect sense. "I'm going to make one public statement," I said decisively, "just to get ahead of this media circus and protect Emma's dignity as much as possible." With the family's agreement, I posted a brief message on my social media accounts. "Regarding the video circulating of my sister's wedding, we ask for privacy during this difficult time. Emma is a kind, intelligent woman who deserves respect, not viral infamy. We love her and are here for her whenever she needs us." As the day progressed, more disturbing information emerged. Tyler revealed that he'd seen Mark aggressively grab Emma's arm at their engagement party when she was talking to one of Mark's colleagues for too long. He hadn't mentioned it at the time, thinking it was a one-off incident. "I should have said something," he admitted, looking ashamed. "But Emma seemed fine afterward, and I didn't want to cause drama." Mom confessed that Emma had called her in tears a month before the wedding, saying she was having doubts. But Mom had chalked it up to normal pre-wedding jitters and advised her to focus on the positive. "I was so fixated on her having a stable relationship, a better marriage than I had," Mom said, wiping away tears. "I ignored all the warning signs." The guilt in the room was palpable. We had all failed Emma in different ways, allowing our own biases, fears, and desire for family harmony to cloud our judgment. I felt it too, maybe if I'd approached my concerns differently, been less confrontational, found a way to maintain contact despite Mark's interference, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. While we were talking, an email notification popped up on my phone. Emma had finally responded to my message from last night. Her first direct communication with me in 6 months. "I'm fine. Everyone is overreacting about a small misunderstanding. Mark and I are going on our honeymoon as planned. Please respect our privacy and stop spreading family business online." The message sounded nothing like my sister. The formal tone, the defensive stance. It read like something Mark had dictated, or even written himself from her account. "She's not fine," I said, showing the others the message. As the day wore on, the situation became even more concerning. Several of Emma's old friends reached out to me after seeing the video, sharing their own observations of Mark's controlling behavior, how he'd check Emma's phone when she wasn't looking, how he'd belittle her interests in front of others, how he'd joke about her intelligence in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. "I stopped getting invited to their dinner parties after I called him out once," said Emma's college roommate Laura. "She gradually stopped returning my calls after that." Each story confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Mark had systematically isolated Emma from anyone who might challenge his authority or offer her perspective. Most alarmingly, we discovered that Emma had quit her job 2 weeks before the wedding. Mark had insisted she didn't need to work anymore, that he would take care of everything, including, it seemed, their joint finances. Emma's name had been removed from her personal bank account, with Mark added as the primary holder. "That's financial abuse," Jessica said firmly. "He's making sure she has no resources of her own, no independence." By evening, Emma had posted a series of honeymoon photos on Instagram, smiling in the airport, boarding a first-class flight, toasting with champagne. The caption read, "Off to paradise with my husband. So blessed and happy. Newlyweds honeymoon bliss." But something about the photos struck me as off. Emma's smile didn't reach her eyes, and in one image, I could see what looked like the edge of a bruise peeking out from beneath her foundation, right where Mark had slapped her. "He's controlling the narrative," I said, showing the others, "making sure everyone thinks everything's fine. I bet he posted these himself." Dad slammed his fist on the table. "This is insane. We should call the police." "And tell them what?" Jessica asked gently. "That we don't like our daughter's husband? That she's on her honeymoon? Unless Emma herself reports abuse, there's very little they can do." She was right, and we all knew it. We were stuck in an excruciating limbo, aware of the danger, but powerless to intervene unless Emma decided she wanted help. As the family meeting wound down, I compiled everything we knew about Mark, the incidents we'd witnessed, the friends' accounts, the financial information, and saved it all in a secure document. Emma might not be ready to see the truth now, but when she was, I wanted to have evidence ready to help her make sense of what had happened to her. "What do we do now?" Mom asked as everyone prepared to leave. "We wait," I said. Though the words tasted bitter, we stay connected to each other. We keep the lines of communication open for Emma, and we prepare to help her when she's ready. I hugged my mother tightly, our shared worry creating a new bond between us. "And Mom? When she does reach out, we have to be ready to act quickly. No hesitation this time." She nodded against my shoulder. No hesitation. I wish I could say I slept that night, but I couldn't. I kept replaying the video in my mind, the look of shock on Emma's face, the casual cruelty in Mark's. I wondered where my sister was at that moment, if she was safe, if she was scared. And I promised myself that when she found her way back to us, I would be there, ready to help her rebuild everything Mark had tried to destroy. If you've ever felt helpless watching someone you love go through something terrible, you know exactly how I felt that night. The hardest part was knowing we couldn't force Emma to see what we could see so clearly. Sometimes the people we care about have to hit rock bottom before they're ready for help. But that doesn't mean we stop caring or stop preparing to be there when they're ready. 2 weeks passed in agonizing slowness. The viral video gradually faded from public attention as newer scandals took its place. But our family remained in suspended animation, waiting for Emma's return. According to her social media, managed entirely by Mark, from what we could tell, they were having a magical honeymoon in Aruba, though the photos became increasingly staged-looking and infrequent. I'd just returned from a morning run when my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found Emma standing there alone, wearing oversized sunglasses despite the cloudy day, clutching her purse tightly against her body. "Emma?" I breathed, hardly believing she was really there. "Can I come in?" Her voice was small, nothing like her usual confident tone. I stepped aside immediately, resisting the urge to pull her into a hug when she flinched slightly as I moved. Once inside, Emma stood awkwardly in my living room, looking at the familiar surroundings as if seeing them for the first time. "I like what you've done with the place," she said, gesturing to the new bookshelves I'd installed during the months of our estrangement. "Thanks. Do you want some tea?" "Coffee? Tea would be nice." In the kitchen, I busied myself with the kettle, giving Emma space to settle in. When I returned with 2 mugs of her favorite chamomile, she had removed her sunglasses, revealing what I'd feared, a faint, yellowish bruise around her right eye, expertly concealed with makeup, but visible in the natural light streaming through my windows. I said nothing about it, taking my cue from Jessica's advice to let Emma lead the conversation. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. "You've probably seen the video." "Yes." "It wasn't as bad as it looked," she said quickly. "Mark was just surprised by the cake thing. He doesn't like public surprises. We talked about it, and he feels terrible. It was just a misunderstanding." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while my insides churned with anger. "How was Aruba?" "Beautiful." "The resort was amazing." She spoke as if reciting from a script. "Mark knows the manager, so we got upgraded to a suite." More silence. I could see Emma struggling with whatever had brought her here, so I waited patiently until she was ready. "I missed you at the wedding," she finally said, her voice cracking. "I missed being there." "I wanted you there," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I asked Mark again the night before, but he said it would be too disruptive to change things at the last minute," he said. She paused, swallowing hard. "He said you'd only try to ruin our special day." My heart ached, but I kept my voice gentle. "I would never have done that, Emma." "I know." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I've known that all along. But somehow when Mark explains things, it all makes sense in the moment. It's only later that I start to question." She trailed off, wiping her tears carefully to avoid disturbing her makeup. I noticed how she sat rigidly upright, her posture perfect, another change from my formerly slouchy sister who used to drape herself across my furniture like a cat. "Where is Mark now?" I asked casually. "At work. He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm having lunch with Mom." Another tear fell. "Rachel, I've missed you so much. These past months without you, it's been like missing a limb." Finally, I reached across the couch and took her hand. "I've missed you too, Em, every single day." We talked for nearly 2 hours, though Emma carefully avoided any direct criticism of Mark. She spoke of the honeymoon in vague terms, focusing on the scenery rather than their interactions. She asked about my work, listened eagerly to stories about my friends and colleagues. It was as if she was drinking in news from a world she'd been cut off from. "My spare room is always available," I said as she prepared to leave. "Anytime, day or night, no questions asked." Emma hugged me tightly at the door. "Thank you for not saying I told you so. That's not what sisters do," I replied, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair, now cut shorter in the style Mark preferred. As Emma walked to her car, my phone rang, Mark's name flashing on the screen. I answered warily. "Hello?" "Stay away from my wife." His voice was eerily calm, which somehow made it more threatening. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, watching Emma drive away. "Don't play dumb. I track her phone. I know exactly where she's been for the past 2 hours." A chill ran down my spine. "Emma is my sister. We're allowed to have a relationship. A relationship that undermines our marriage? That's what you want, isn't it? To turn her against me? To ruin our happiness because you're lonely and bitter?" "Mark," Emma came to me. "I didn't seek her out. Because you've poisoned her mind for years?" he hissed. "Listen carefully, Rachel. If you continue to interfere in our marriage, I'll make sure Emma never speaks to you again. And that's just for starters. I know where you live, where you work. I have friends in places that could make your life very difficult." The threat hung in the air between us. I gripped the phone tightly, torn between fear and rage. "Are you threatening me?" I managed to ask. "I'm explaining consequences. Stay away from Emma. This is your only warning." He hung up, leaving me shaking. Immediately, I started recording every detail of the conversation, including the time and date. Then I called Jessica, who had become our family's unofficial abuse expert. "He's escalating," she said grimly after I recounted the call. "Abusers are most dangerous when they feel their control slipping. Emma reaching out to you independently threatens that control. What do I do? If I tell Emma about the call, it might scare her away. Document everything. Be available, but don't push. And consider getting a security system for your apartment." I took her advice seriously, installing cameras that weekend and changing my routine to be less predictable. But I also made a plan with Mom and Tyler. We would maintain contact with Emma without directly confronting her about Mark, building a support network she could access when she was ready. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I established a secret communication system. She created a new email account Mark didn't know about, which she could access from computers at the public library. We set up a code word Stargazer, another childhood reference that she could text me if she ever needed immediate help. Gradually, in fragments shared through these secret channels, Emma began to reveal the reality of her married life. Mark controlled their finances completely. Emma received an allowance for personal expenses. He checked her phone regularly, reading all her messages and monitoring her calls. He had installed cameras in their apartment for security purposes, but used them to watch her when he wasn't home. He criticized her cooking, her appearance, her intelligence, always privately, maintaining his charming facade in public. He had rules about what she could wear, who she could talk to, and how long she could be out of the house. And most alarmingly, the slap at the wedding hadn't been an isolated incident. It wasn't always physical, mostly it was grabbing her arm or blocking her path, but the threat of violence hung over their home like a storm cloud. "I made a mistake, Rachel," she finally admitted in one of her emails. "A terrible mistake, but I don't know how to fix it." The admission was the breakthrough we'd been waiting for. Emma was finally seeing her situation clearly. Now, we just needed to help her find the courage to leave and to keep her safe when she did. 3 months into Emma's marriage, we met at a cafe 20 miles from her apartment, far enough that she wouldn't run into anyone who knew Mark. I arrived early and secured a corner table with a view of both entrances, as Emma had requested. She'd become hypervigilant about being seen or followed. When she arrived, looking nervously over her shoulder, I wasn't alone. Jessica sat beside me, along with a woman I'd never met before, Jessica's colleague from the women's shelter, where she volunteered. "Emma, this is Melissa," Jessica said after hugs and greetings. "She's a domestic violence advocate I trust completely." Emma looked panicked. "I never said anything about domestic violence. Is that what you've been telling people about my marriage?" "We haven't labeled anything," I assured her quickly. "Melissa just has experience helping women in complicated situations. She might have perspectives we haven't considered." Reluctantly, Emma sat down, fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd developed. As the conversation unfolded, Melissa gently asked questions about Emma's daily life, her relationship dynamics, and her feelings. She never used terms like abuse or victim, but instead focused on patterns and safety. "What happens when you disagree with Mark about something?" she asked. Emma stared into her untouched coffee. "I don't disagree with him anymore. It's not worth the tension. And if you want to see family or friends, I need to plan it in advance. He likes to know my schedule." She glanced at her watch. She had exactly 90 minutes before Mark expected her home from her dentist appointment. Melissa nodded, then placed a pamphlet face down on the table. "This outlines some common relationship dynamics. Maybe take it home and see if anything resonates with you." Emma slipped it into her purse without looking at it. But something had shifted in her expression recognition. Perhaps that her situation had a name, a pattern, a path that others had walked before. "I'm not ready to leave him," she said suddenly, as if we'd been pressuring her to do so. "Things can still improve. Marriage takes work." "Of course," Melissa said calmly. "Any decision about your relationship is yours alone to make. But it might be helpful to have a safety plan, just in case things ever escalate and you need a break." Many couples take space when tensions rise. This framing a temporary break rather than a permanent escape seemed to ease Emma's resistance. She agreed to meet again and left shortly after, still skittish but with a flicker of something new in her eyes. Possibility. Over the next few weeks, through careful planning and coded communications, we developed Emma's exit strategy. Jessica helped us connect with resources, while Tyler offered his vacation cabin as a safe house. I prepared my spare bedroom with everything Emma might need for an extended stay. The plan was meticulous. Emma would gradually, over several weeks, collect important documents and irreplaceable keepsakes, storing them in a locker at the train station. She would open a new bank account at a different bank, diverting small amounts from her allowance that Mark wouldn't notice. On the day of her exit planned for when Mark would be at an overnight business dinner, Tyler would pick her up at a predetermined location and drive her to my apartment. We would have a lawyer ready to file an emergency restraining order based on evidence Emma had been secretly documenting. Security measures were installed at my apartment: new locks, a doorbell camera, reinforced doors. Each of us had specific roles and backup plans in case something went wrong. We rehearsed scenarios, considered contingencies, prepared for Mark's likely reactions. It felt like planning a military operation rather than helping my sister leave her husband. Meanwhile, I worked from home more often, adjusting my schedule to accommodate the coming changes. I stocked my pantry with Emma's favorite foods, bought duplicates of toiletries she might need, made space in my closet for her clothes. Every preparation was both hopeful and heartbreaking, necessary steps toward my sister's freedom that also acknowledged the trauma she'd endured. 2 days before the planned exit, Emma called me in a panic. "Mark changed his plans," she whispered. "He's not going to the business dinner tomorrow. He says he wants to surprise me with a romantic evening at home." My stomach dropped. Did he say why he canceled the trip? No, but he's been checking my phone more often lately. And yesterday he asked why I'd withdrawn cash from the ATM last week. The timing was too suspicious. Had Mark somehow discovered our plans? Was he testing Emma? "We need to move up the timeline," I said, already texting Tyler and Jessica. "Can you get out tonight?" "I don't know. He's working from home today, watching me like a hawk." We needed a diversion, something that would get Mark out of the house long enough for Emma to leave safely. As we strategized, a text came through from Mom. "Mark just called asking if I'd seen Emma today. Said she seemed off lately." What's happening? Mark was already suspicious. We couldn't wait. "Tell him you need help with a plumbing emergency," I suggested to Emma. "Say, Mom's bathroom pipe burst and Dad can't get there until tomorrow. He'll just tell me to call a plumber. Say Mom's panicking and specifically ask for him because he fixed something similar last year." It was a desperate plan, but we had no alternatives. Emma agreed to try it and hung up quickly as she heard Mark coming up the stairs. The next hour was excruciating as I waited by my phone, emergency bag packed, car keys in hand. Finally, a text from Emma. "He left. Mom convinced him. Coming now." I alerted the team and headed to our meeting point, a coffee shop parking lot midway between our homes. When Emma's Uber pulled up 20 minutes later, I hardly recognized my sister. Her face was drawn, hair hastily pulled back, clutching only her purse and a small backpack. "I couldn't get my suitcase without him noticing," she explained as she slid into my passenger seat. "I just grabbed what I could." "It doesn't matter," I assured her, squeezing her hand before pulling quickly onto the road. "We can replace everything else." Emma was trembling violently as we drove, jumping at every car that seemed to follow us for more than a block. I took a circuitous route back to my apartment, watching carefully to ensure we weren't being followed. The moment we walked through my door, Emma collapsed into tears deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from her very core. I held her as she cried, murmuring reassurances, until the storm passed. "I can't believe I actually left," she whispered, looking around my apartment as if she'd landed on an alien planet. "What have I done? He'll be so angry." "You've taken the first step toward getting your life back," I told her, leading her to the couch. "And you're not alone. Not anymore." I made her tea while she showered, changing into clothes I'd bought for her soft, comfortable things in the bright colors she used to love before Mark's influence. When she emerged, looking smaller and younger in oversized sweats, her phone was already buzzing constantly, with calls and texts from Mark. "He's back at the apartment," she said, reading a message. "He knows I'm gone. He says if I don't come home in 1 hour, he'll call the police and report me missing. Let him." Jessica had arrived and spoke calmly from the doorway. "The police will simply confirm you left voluntarily and are safe. They won't tell him where you are." Emma's phone continued to vibrate Mark's tactics, escalating from concern to anger to threats to tearful pleas for reconciliation, cycling through manipulative strategies with practiced precision. With Jessica's guidance, Emma composed a single text. "I am safe. I need space. Please don't contact me for now." She then turned off her phone, her hands shaking but her chin lifting slightly, the first gesture of defiance I'd seen from her in years. That night, Emma slept in my spare room behind a locked door, her choice, a habit formed from months of vigilance. I stayed awake, monitoring security cameras, jumping at every sound, prepared to call 911 at the slightest sign of Mark's presence. He didn't come that night, but the battle had just begun. Emma was out, but she wasn't free, not yet. The hardest part still lay ahead, rebuilding her confidence, securing her legal protection, and healing from wounds both visible and hidden. But for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of hope. My sister had taken the most difficult step of all she'd chosen to leave. The morning after Emma's escape, we went straight to the courthouse to file for an emergency restraining order. The viral wedding video, which had been Emma's greatest humiliation, now became crucial evidence. Along with it, we submitted Emma's documentation of Mark's controlling behavior, photos of bruises she'd hidden, and recordings of threatening voicemails he'd left overnight when he realized she wasn't coming back. The judge needs to see a pattern of behavior, explained Denise, the lawyer Jessica had connected us with, who specialized in domestic violence cases. The more evidence we have, the stronger the case. Emma sat stiffly in the lawyer's office, flinching slightly each time her phone buzzed with another message from Mark. She'd turned it back on only to preserve evidence of his harassment over 60 messages in 8 hours, ranging from, "I love you, please come home too, you've destroyed everything," to explicit threats against me and anyone helping her. "Is this really necessary?" Emma asked as Denise prepared the paperwork. "Maybe if I just talk to him, explain that I need some time." "That's your decision," Denise said carefully. "But in my experience, without legal boundaries, the harassment typically escalates. The restraining order doesn't have to be permanent. It gives you protection while you decide your next steps." Emma nodded reluctantly and signed the forms. As we left the courthouse, temporary order in hand, she seemed both relieved and terrified, as if she'd jumped from a burning building and was still falling, uncertain where she would land. Mark's response to the restraining order was swift and aggressive. He hired an expensive attorney who immediately filed to have the order dismissed, claiming Emma was emotionally unstable and had been influenced by her estranged sister's vendetta against him. "This is a classic Darvo response," Denise explained. "Denis, attack. Reverse victim and offender. He's trying to paint himself as the victim and you as the aggressor." The next few weeks brought a flurry of legal maneuvers. Mark contested everything, dragging out proceedings, using every opportunity to try to communicate with Emma through his lawyer. He showed up at my workplace one day, cornering me in the parking garage to demand I stop poisoning Emma against him. Security cameras captured the encounter, resulting in his arrest for violating the restraining order's provision against contacting Emma's family. The district attorney, already reviewing the wedding video, added the violation to a growing list of concerns about Mark's behavior. Throughout this turbulent time, Emma began the difficult work of healing. She started therapy with a trauma specialist, attending sessions 3 times a week. The first sessions left her emotionally drained, often sleeping for hours afterward as her mind and body processed the reality of what she'd experienced. "My therapist says I've been in survival mode for so long that I didn't allow myself to recognize what was happening," she explained one evening as we shared dinner in my apartment, now secured with additional locks and a security system. She called it trauma bonding, where you develop an attachment to someone who intermittently abuses and rewards you. I listened, trying to understand the psychological complexity of what Emma had endured. It wasn't as simple as falling for the wrong guy or making bad decisions. Mark had systematically dismantled her sense of self, replacing her perceptions with his own twisted reality until she couldn't trust her own instinct. The family rallied around Emma in ways that surprised and moved me. Dad became unexpectedly gentle, bringing over homemade meals and sitting quietly with Emma when words failed. Mom, initially overwhelmed with guilt, channeled her energy into practical help, taking Emma to appointments, helping her replace identification documents, researching support groups. Tyler and Jessica opened their home for family gatherings, where Emma could gradually rebuild her social confidence in a safe environment. We attended joint counseling sessions to address the family dynamics that had contributed to Emma's vulnerability. The way we'd enabled Mark by prioritizing politeness over protection, by dismissing red flags in the name of family peace. It was painful but necessary work, forcing us all to examine our roles in what had happened. After 3 months of living with me, Emma found the strength to look for her own apartment. I helped her search for places with good security, eventually finding a unit in a building with controlled access and 24-hour concierge service. When she signed the lease in her name alone, I saw a flash of the independent, confident woman my sister had once been. "I need to stand on my own again," she explained as I helped her move in. "I'll always be grateful for your protection, but I need to remember how to protect myself. Her new apartment became a canvas for her recovering identity. She painted the walls bright turquoise, a color Mark had forbidden, as tacky, and filled bookshelves with novels and poetry collections he had dismissed as frivolous. She adopted a cat from the local shelter, naming him Freedom in a moment of symbolic significance that made us both laugh and cry simultaneously. The legal battle continued in the background of this healing process. Mark finally agreed to the annulment after his lawyer advised him that fighting it would only expose more of his behavior to public scrutiny. The district attorney ultimately decided not to pursue assault charges based on the wedding video, considering it a borderline case without Emma's cooperation as a witness. Emma, still processing her trauma, wasn't ready to testify in a criminal case. A decision we all supported, even as it frustrated Dad's desire to see Mark pay for what he did. Justice looks different for every survivor, Emma's therapist reminded us. For some, it's a conviction. For others, it's rebuilding a life that the abuser can't touch. Mark made one final attempt at contact 6 months after Emma left. He sent a letter through his attorney, ostensibly about dividing their wedding gifts, but filled with manipulative language about forgiveness and second chances. Emma read it once, then shredded it without responding. 3 months ago, I might have gone back, she admitted that evening. 1 month ago, I would have agonized over how to respond. Today, I just feel nothing. And that's progress. I hugged her tightly, recognizing in that moment that my sister was truly finding her way back, not to who she had been before Mark, but to a newer, stronger version of herself forged through terrible experience. The annulment was finalized exactly 6 months after Emma's wedding day. Rather than marking the occasion with sadness, Emma invited our family to a small dinner celebration at her apartment, not mourning a failed marriage, but celebrating her freedom and new beginning. As we toasted with glasses of champagne, I studied my sister's face across the table. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes for so long had faded. In its place was something new, a hard-earned wisdom. Yes, but also a rekindled spark of joy. To new beginnings, Emma said, raising her glass, and to the family who never stopped believing I was worth fighting for. Exactly 1 year after Emma left Mark, we found ourselves on a beach in North Carolina, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. This sister's vacation had been Emma's idea, a way to reclaim joy and celebrate her journey from victim to survivor to thriver. I can't believe it's been a year, Emma said, digging her toes into the cool sand. She looked healthier than I'd seen her in years. Her natural curves returned after Mark's restrictive dieting rules had fallen away, her hair grown out into the curly style she'd always loved, her smile reaching her eyes again. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, I admitted. Other times, it feels like another lifetime. Emma nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. My therapist says trauma changes our perception of time. The brain processes it differently than normal memories. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the waves crash against the shore. So much had changed in a year. Our family, fractured by Mark's manipulation and our own failings, had grown closer through the crisis. We communicated more honestly, respected boundaries more carefully, and valued each other with a new appreciation born from nearly losing one of our own. I had a job interview last week, Emma said suddenly. I didn't want to tell anyone until I knew for sure, but I got the offer yesterday. That's amazing. What's the job? Her eyes lit up with excitement. It's with the Domestic Violence Resource Center. I'll be coordinating their community outreach program, speaking at schools and organizations about recognizing the signs of abuse. I couldn't have been prouder. Over the past few months, Emma had begun sharing her story in small support groups, discovering that her experience could help others recognize warning signs in their own relationships. What started as part of her therapy had evolved into a calling. They want to use the wedding video in their educational materials, she continued. They said it perfectly captures how abusers can switch from charm to violence in an instant, especially when their control is challenged. The video that had once been her greatest humiliation had transformed into a powerful teaching tool. Emma had reclaimed the narrative, turning Mark's public exposure of his true nature into a force for good. How do you feel about that? I asked carefully. Honestly, it feels right. That video was seen by millions of people as entertainment, as a scandalous moment. If it can now help someone recognize abuse before it escalates, then something good came from it after all. Emma had made remarkable progress in her healing journey. After 6 months of intensive therapy, she had transitioned to bi-weekly sessions. She'd rebuilt friendships that had withered under Mark's isolation tactics. She'd even started dating again, very cautiously, coffee dates in public places with a man she'd met through a volunteer program who understood her need to take things extremely slowly. I had worried about being overprotective during this time, struggling to find the balance between supporting Emma and allowing her the independence she needed to rebuild. We'd had honest conversations about it, establishing boundaries that worked for both of us. I promised not to check up on her constantly. She promised to be honest about her needs, rather than pretending to be fine when she wasn't. "You know what I realized recently?" Emma said, drawing patterns in the sand. "Before everything happened with Mark, I always thought abuse was something that happened to other people, women who somehow lacked the strength or smarts to leave bad relationships." She looked up at me, her expression serious. "Now I understand how gradual it is, how someone can slip under your defenses bit by bit, until you don't recognize yourself anymore. And I understand why women stay, because leaving is the most dangerous time, because abusers make you believe you have nowhere to go, because they convince you the problem is you, not them." I nodded, remembering how, even with the supportive family and financial resources, Emma's escape had still been terrifying and difficult. For women without such advantages, the barriers to leaving could seem insurmountable. "That's why your work with the Resource Center is so important," I said. "You understand in a way that others can't." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma pulled out her phone. "Let's take a sunset picture," she suggested, "for the family chat." We posed with the colorful sky behind us, our heads together, smiling genuinely. It struck me how different this was from the carefully staged, Mark-approved photos of the previous year. This moment was authentic, imperfect, real. After sending the photo, Emma turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I never properly thanked you, Rachel, for seeing what was happening when I couldn't, for being ready to help even after I shut you out, for not saying 'I told you so' when you had every right to." "You never have to thank me for being your sister," I said, squeezing her hand. "Besides, you did the hardest part yourself. You found the courage to leave." "Not by myself," Emma corrected. "With help." That's the message I share now, that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the first step toward freedom. As darkness fell over the beach, we gathered our things and headed back toward our rental cottage. Emma walked with a confidence that had been absent a year ago, her shoulders straight, her stride purposeful. My little sister had been through fire and emerged not unscathed but undefeated, her spirit intact. The path ahead wouldn't always be smooth. Emma still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at certain triggers, still second-guessed her perceptions, occasionally after effects of the gaslighting she'd endured. But she had tools now to manage these responses, and a support system that wouldn't fail her again. As for Mark, we rarely spoke his name anymore. The last we'd heard, he had moved to another state after his reputation in our community was irreparably damaged by the viral video and subsequent revelations. Emma had legally reverted to her maiden name, Wilson, removing the final trace of his presence in her life. That night, as we sat on the cottage porch with glasses of wine, Emma said something that perfectly captured her journey. "The most important thing I've learned is that family isn't just about blood or marriage. Real family stands by you even when it's difficult, tells you the truth even when it hurts, and loves you enough to let you find your own way home." I couldn't have said it better myself. Have you ever witnessed someone you love transform after escaping a toxic situation? Or maybe you've been through something similar yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. This journey has taught me so much about the importance of trusting your instincts and speaking up even when it's difficult. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that there's life after abuse. I'm so grateful to each of you for listening to our family's story, and I hope it brings strength to anyone who needs it. Remember, healing isn't linear, but it is possible.